what's checking, everybody? We're back. It's another edition of the Orange Bloods Texas Football Channel. I'm Geoff Ketchum, joined, as always, by Anwar Richardson, looking very, I dig the gray and the pink fuchsia / combo. I like that. You're looking stylish today.
Thank you. First of all, by us doing these videos all the time, I realized I have to go deep into my closet to make sure I'm not wearing stuff that people see every week. And so I'm deep. I am deep into the closet. But, you know, today, as we record, this is Wednesday, and they have an open practice for the fans. So I also need something I can sweat in while I'm sitting out there. So it's kind of hopefully multi-purpose.
Well, look, hit the like button if you like what we're talking about. Subscribe to the channel. We've got all kinds of content every single day on this channel. Today on Anwar, we're just kind of talking about the Texas football team. You mentioned it. It's Wednesday. They've had 2 practices this week. There's an open practice this evening, which I'm thinking about showing up for, FYI. Yeah, I think I'm making the drive to Austin and taking it feels like a really significant moment in training camp where the last 2 days, KC Hudson Card has been taking the overwhelming majority of reps with the first team offense. I don't want to say all the reps because that leads you into a situation where, you know, he could have taken 99% of them and then somebody could get you on he took all of the reps, but it seems pretty clear that Hudson Card's taking the majority of the reps with the first team offense. Casey Thompson now working with the twos. That could change. It could change as early as tonight, as a matter of fact. When the crowd goes in, maybe they revert back to 50-50. Maybe we see a situation where Casey Thompson gets the overwhelming majority of the reps with the ones. But so far this week, Hudson Card's been taking the reps with the ones. And I thought it was really interesting yesterday that Steve Sarkisian, in talking about the quarterbacks, mentioned that since he made that move, whatever you want to call it, the quarterbacks have had their best 2 days of camp since that move was made. It makes for some really interesting conversation, I think, on where we are with the quarterback position.
Yeah, it is fascinating, Ketch, because the move is done because he came out of that Saturday scrimmage saying that neither quarterback was really that impressive, right? So is there a flip right now in order to give Hudson a chance? Is there a flip right now in order to spark Casey, right, and get him motivated and see how he responds to potentially, being the backup at this moment and kind of flipping the script? And it seemed like the thing that Sarkisian is going to be interesting from the fan perspective. We get to watch it tonight. Sarkisian, just his big issue, Ketch, is they look good in practice. And it hasn't translated to the big field. So big, the scrimmages. So it's going to be interesting now when they have an open practice, Ketch, in front of fans, right? There's going to be a little bit more adrenaline that's going to be going. How do those guys respond? How do those guys make the throws? So, I still believe, it's interesting. Sarkisian said he didn't have a timetable to make a decision. But he also did say that he's going to start prepping for Louisiana by midweek of next week. I think you got to have a decision by that point, right? I mean, you've got to have your starter getting the majority of the reps preparing for Louisiana. So I believe coming out of this weekend, we'll have a really clear gauge as to where it's going. But this week, we talked about it before, Ketch, that it's going to be a big week for Casey Thompson. It's a big week for Hudson Card. And I think the next few practices and the scrimmage is what decides it.
I think it's decided. And I think that when you hear Sarkisian say the best 2 days that the quarterbacks have been the last 2 days, and you ask yourself, well, what changed in those 2 days? And the answer is Sarkisian specifically moves Hudson Card into the first team offense, working with the ones exclusively, and Casey Thompson goes to the twos. Sarkisian is telling us, like, hey, that move worked. Last 2 days, both guys have been the best that they've been in camp so far. I think that at this point, I mean, if you make a decision and it's working, what's your motivation to go against that at this point? So they make the move in the last 2 days. Sarkisian seems really happy with what his quarterbacks are doing. I think you tinker with that too much and you're turning into a little bit of the Tinker Man, where you finally got it going good after a Saturday scrimmage in which you weren't happy. And now you're going to reverse it. And now that Hudson Card's playing well, you're going to put Casey Thompson back into the first team offense exclusively. It just seems like the kind of thing that doesn't make sense to me. And it seems like if Hudson Card had not had, in Sarkisian's words, his best 2 days of practice in the last 2 days of practice, I think you could make a justifiable call to switch it up again. I don't know what his motivation is to change it up when the results he's gotten from the moves on Monday have apparently paid off in a way that he's looking for.
There's two things too, Ketch, that, if you're looking for like context clues, we've talked about it before. One was the story that Sarkisian gets into about this tough decision. He used the Matt Castle, Matt Leinart conversation. And look, the more, of course, I think about it, he's a quarterback. He's a former quarterback. He understands the quarterback story, quarterback narrative will always be the thing that drives it. And the fact that he went into so much detail about it seemed to be kind of an indication that, okay, this may be laying some groundwork. The second thing, though, Ketch, is that he talked on Saturday about the scrimmage, and he had said that Casey Thompson was the only person that had a turnover. But as we will know, that that actually there were some more turnovers by both guys. But the fact that that's the one that he remembered, the fact that that's the one that stood out to him, and the fact that in that moment, that's all he thought about. It's kind of like sometimes you're in a relationship and sometimes someone does something that might be little, but you always remember that little bad thing that they've done. You kind of forget about some of the other positive things that were done because that's kind of where the relationship's headed. I'm not saying it's a bad relationship, but it's very telling that that's the only thing that he really thought about on the fly. And then we talked to him on Tuesday, and he had a chance to tell us, like he said, both guys played well, but he still talked about the things he was disappointed with. So I think there's some little things that maybe context clues that he's putting out there that if you only remember one bad play, but both guys probably had some hiccups, like it's probably sells where it's headed. And you're right. If all things, if Hudson is doing well with the first team, then why would you rock that boat?
And look, I have to believe that if Casey Thompson was absolutely going to be the starter, this is a ass backwards way of getting your guy ready to go when the game now is 17 days away. You know what I mean? Like if Casey were going to be the starter, this week isn't the week to start taking the 1 reps away from him. And you know what's interesting about this conversation is, and I was having this on Twitter last night when talking about, I think, the circumstances of what's taking place. I think my upside, when I'm a Hudson Card homer, right? I'm the president of the fan club. But I think that it's clear, I would hope it's clearly established that I think that Casey Thompson's a hell of a quarterback prospect. And I was thinking about it just from today's stand, like this year, I think their upside this year is the same. Like if you were to ask me if these two guys both have hit their optimal success this season, I think they both finished second team all Big 12 at the quarterback position. I don't know that anybody's going to take the mantle this year away from Spencer Rattler. So I think in a perfect world where these guys play their absolute best, 12-game starters, each of them, I can see each of them being second team all Big 12 in a best case scenario. But I tend to think they're both 8-4, 9-3 quarterbacks this year. For me, this has always been about long-term upside. It's as much about next year as it is this year. And I understand the conversation of, well, Sark has to coach for this year and he has to make the best absolute decision because he can't leave games on the table. They can't lose to Arkansas. They can't lose to Louisiana. He doesn't have that kind of margin of error right now. It's unfair, but that's where he is in season one. And in reality, I think both of these guys are probably 9-3 quarterbacks this season. I don't know that if they played this season 100 times, I don't know that in the computer model that these guys have seasons that go beyond. They've never started a game before. Like, we have to temper expectations a little bit and say, when they play against number 23 Louisiana in the opener, it's their first career start. It's their first career start at home. It's their first career start against a ranked team. Like, it's kind of the same for both of them. It's in that next season. It's both of these guys coming off of a 12-game season starting this year. What do I think about 2022? And that's where I think Hudson Card's long-term upside is higher for me than Casey. Whereas I think Hudson Card has the natural ability and the talent to be a day 1 or day 2 NFL draft pick. I don't know that I quite feel that way about Casey Thompson, but I don't think either one of those guys scratches that surface necessarily this year. Like, I think they're kind of the same.
I mean, you're almost throwing out the R word, rebuild. Like, it's almost like that's where it's because we're not talking about plug and play, right? Where Lincoln Riley says, let me just throw in Spencer Rattler. He'll make a couple of mistakes and then we'll still win the Big 12 championship. Like,
only because the rest of the Big 12 pooped in their pants. I mean, it should have been Oklahoma's reloading/rebuilding a year ago ends with them being champions. But it starts with them going 2-2 and losing a couple of conference games early on. Yeah. And the Big 12 let them off the hook.
Absolutely. I mean, Texas let them off the hook.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Texas let them off the hook.
That was it. That was the final. That was the time to put, that nail in that coffin. And then that second half, it just didn't happen. And then, now we're talking about a guy who's going to be potentially the number 1 overall pick. So I hear you. What I don't know, Ketch, I don't know how Texas fans are going to respond to 8 wins. I don't know how you sell that to a fan base of 2022 when, you're saying, hey, recruiting don't worry about the 2022 class, worry about 2023. Don't worry about success in 2021 and winning the Big 12 championship, worry about 2022. It's a kicking of the can down the road that it is going to be interesting, catching that. Texas fans, you guys write it in the comments of what you think, but I just think I wonder if there will be a lot of disappointment, a lot of questioning of the move if this is all that Texas ends up doing and ends up making a coaching change for 8 wins.
I on some level, I hear everything that you're saying, and I can't make my prediction or tell people what I think's going to happen based on how I then think they will react to the thing that happens. Texas fans, look, you and I did a video earlier this summer where we talked about, is it a rebuild? Is it a reload? We couldn't really decide on which word we wanted to use, but it didn't feel like a reload because what are you reloading? A 7-3 team that came in 3rd in the Big 12? You don't want to reload that, but it's not really a rebuild either. So it's hard to describe what this thing is. The reality is this is a team that comes into the season ranked number 21 in the country. When you get ranked 21st in the country in the preseason, that's the national media basically saying, we think you go 8-4 or 9-3. If anybody thought they were going to do better than that, they'd be ranked 15th or 13th or 10th. So look, 8-4, 9-3 doesn't change recruiting. It doesn't change recruiting in 2022, and it probably puts Texas behind the 8 ball in 2023, unless A&M has a similar type season. And at that point, at least in state, you're not behind the 8 ball. But yeah, no, what I'm telling you is that this team probably goes 9-3. They probably finish the season ranked somewhere between 15th and 20th, depending on what happens in the bowl game. And I don't know that moves the needle the way Texas fans want. But what Texas fans have wanted, they haven't gotten for a decade. So how am I supposed to – what are Texas fans going to think? They'll probably think a lot of the same stuff that they've already been thinking, which is, why can't we take a big step? But this thing I've said from the beginning with both of these quarterbacks really is I think if you're a Texas fan, the most realistic thing that you can picture is you go 9-3 this year, and next year you return in your starting quarterback. You're returning what might be a first-team All-American running back. You're returning all three of your starting wide receivers. You're probably bringing back almost your entire offensive line. You're bringing back a lot of your defense, and you're bringing back coaching continuity. So when we look at 2022, a 9-3 season serves as a springboard to something else. If you're a Texas fan and you think that the springboard should have already happened, that the 10-2 season should be the 10-2, 11-1 season that has the program in the conversation of the playoffs, it just feels myopic. It feels like you're part of the problem at that point if you can't see really where the program is from a talent standpoint. Because look, if we took the quarterback conversation out of the equation, what is this team right now? Let's forget about quarterback. What's the rest of the team? Is this a 10-2 team outside of quarterback?
No, because you have a defense that finished 7th last season. There's defensive change with Krakowski, right? But there's one guy that was a Big 12 preseason on that defense, Deshaun Jameson. That was it, right? And from an offensive standpoint, we've got receivers that no one has over 500 yards receiving from last season. Tight ends, good room, still some, Cade Brewer, and then there's a bunch of other guys who are unproven. Bijan, we believe he will be great. We still got to see it, but we just got to see it play out. So yeah, I mean, outside, Lynn, you've said Deontay Foreman had 2,000 yards rushing and Texas won 5 games. So I get it. So yes, I'm again, we're a couple of weeks away from making a prediction, and I'm still in that 8 to 9 win range, regardless of who's the QB.
It's interesting. Regardless of who the QB is, I'm leaning like 9-3, and I think that that's the thing about the quarterback decision that I think is really interesting. Is I don't know that it matters this year who the starting quarterback is. I think if it was as easy as one of these two guys versus the other gets you to 10 or 11 wins and the other guy doesn't, starter would already be in place. I mean, if Sark feels like he's got a starting quarterback on this team that's taking it to 10-2 or 11-1 in the Big 12 championship game, and the other guy can't do that or won't likely do that, I feel like the decision's already made. I think everybody agrees this is a close competition, that both of these guys have left opportunities to gain ground or separate or take the lead, that both guys have kind of missed on those opportunities. It just keeps coming down to, for me, this season has to be a springboard. If at the end of the year, they're not playing their best football, and we can't look at whoever the quarterback is and say, yeah, man, because this is what you could do with Spencer Rattler a year ago. When the year ends, you can say, I can see that guy winning another Big 12 championship, since he did accomplish that in year one. But we're hearing people from Oklahoma, like hearing non-Oklahoma people say Oklahoma should be ranked number 1 in the country. They're bringing back as many guys as anybody, and they're settled at quarterback. And Clemson really isn't. And Alabama's changing their everybody else is changing their quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. And Oklahoma brings theirs back. Next year, if you're Texas, that has a chance to be you. You have a chance to be the program where everybody looks in the offseason and goes, well, who's the best returning quarterback in the Big 12? And you go, God, it looks like it's Hudson Card or Casey Thompson. And if that's an answer, if that's an actual thing that happens, you can see where next year you can legitimately start talking about winning a Big 12 championship. I just think in a world where you got to walk before you can run, Texas is still walking. They don't have a starting quarterback right now. They may be on the verge of that, but it's funny. I got into a conversation with R. Long on the message boards. We were talking about Chance Mock and Vince Young back in 2003, because doesn't every conversation go back to Colt McCoy and Vince Young at some point? But in 2003, which is 18 seasons ago, Chance Mock takes over the year as the starter. And guess who the second game of the season was against? Arkansas.
I was going to say that's a leading
Arkansas.
question.
How weird is that, right? Like
Yeah.
they barely play Arkansas, but that was a game they at home they lost 38-28. And Chance Mock looked like a guy making his second career start. Threw 3 touchdowns, didn't have any picks, but barely completed 50% of his passes, didn't have a running game. The offensive line didn't play well, and the defense wasn't good enough. And that is kind of what we've been talking about with this team. So for all of the quarterback conversation, I think those two guys most likely are both players that would have very good seasons this year. I think we're splitting hairs. I think we're talking about Casey Thompson, 12 games versus Hudson Card, 12 games in 2021. I think they both have very similar seasons. The question is, does Steve Sarkisian believe that in his second year, one of these guys clearly has an upside higher than the other? I've maintained that I believe that answer is Hudson Card. It feels like, based on what's happening right now, that Sarkisian is painting a picture and telling a story that ends with Hudson Card being the starter. It starts with that USC story that he tells. It goes on to, on Saturday, mentioning Thompson's turnovers, but not mentioning really that Hudson Card had a turnover as well. And now we see this week that 17 days from the first game, Hudson Card's getting all the reps or most of the reps with the ones. Again, it feels like a picture is being painted, but I don't feel like it should be an indictment on what Casey Thompson can do on the field this year. I feel like Sark is making a long-term decision and going with Hudson Card, because I don't know that it matters who he picks in 2021 as it relates to 2021.
The last thing I'll say, as I'm just kind of like looking up some things here, and give me a really great idea for a column this weekend. I'm not going to mention it, but
I won't steal it from you.
Huh? Oh, that's true. It's hard for you to steal it from me, but
true.
But I go first.
True.
So it's hard for me. I need it'll be. But someone will go and do the research and post it on our message board, and then I won't have what I want.
Okay.
But it'll be interesting because Sark is the QB whisperer, right? I mean, this is supposed to be what he does. Like, this is his wheelhouse, should be able to take a good quarterback and make them great. Like, that's his reputation. So I know it's about the building process, right? And I'm not debating that portion of it, but I think sometimes if you're a Texas fan, I think you're fair to say, hey, this Sarkisian is known. This is what he's built on. Like, this is his reputation of taking quarterbacks and developing them into all conference players, NFL draft picks. And Hudson Card is a guy that is supposed to be like that. I mean, clearly he's kind of put Casey Thompson in that kind of Matt Castle kind of role. By the way, did Matt Castle last a little bit longer in the NFL than Leinart? So
may have.
I think he did. So I think that's kind of weird. Got to look that up. Someone probably put that in the comments. So that being said, I just feel two things. I think that if Sark, I'll close with this. If Sark is the QB whisperer, so that means to me, whoever he puts out there is got to be a guy with high upside that should be able to compete with the big boys. Secondly, we always talk about he's supposed to be able to bring the little things from a coaching perspective, that there were so many close games that Texas was in, that if he just does the little things that hadn't been done before, that maybe that makes a difference. So we're talking about binders, we're talking about field goals, as opposed to, going for it on fourth down, like the not having a huge rotation catch and playing your best players, which he said he's going to do. So, I'm not saying dare to dream, but I understand if there might be a Texas fan that says, hey, if we get these little things that come into place, that kind of leads into it. So I'll be interested, Ketch, because I don't know. I'm in the 8 to 9 win range, right? But I still don't know if I'm short selling it a little bit, just because at the end of the day, I know we're saying either quarterback, it probably doesn't matter, but I feel like if you're a quarterback for Steve Sarkisian, it should matter. right? I just feel like it should matter and it should make a difference.
Real quick, I think that if Sark gets a year with Sam Ehlinger, and you ask me, do I think Sam Ehlinger under Sark takes that step from, what do we call Sam? Pretty good? Very good? He wasn't great.
Yeah, it wasn't great. Whatever's below great.
So maybe he's very good. I think that's fair.
Sure.
Do I think if Sam's back this year, do I think that Sam goes from very good to great under Sarkisian? Yeah, I think I do. I think the point you're making is a legitimate one. I don't know what's fair when a guy hasn't played before. Like, I don't know that we can even call Thompson and Card good yet. You know, the hope is by the end of the second game of the season, you can put a label, you can put an adjective on whoever the starter is, and we can say, oh, well, this guy's either good or he's pretty good or he's very good or he's great. But like, it's hard to do it with either guy. Let me ask you this question. 2 final questions, and I'll wrap it up. If Hudson Card is named the starter and starts all 12 games, so I'm letting you know in advance he doesn't play terrible enough that he would lose his job, right?
Okay.
Starts all 12 games. You're not on the record. I'm not going to hold you to this. I'm just curious. Your instant reaction prediction for the season with that knowledge is what?
It's tough because I don't want to do numbers like yards or, TDs and interceptions. I think either guy could struggle against Louisiana in the season opener, Ketch.
Totally agree.
I don't, that Louisiana, I'm telling you, these are a bunch of grown ass men that are coming back, that are playing. These are some grown ass men that are going to be on this
team. They're basically Iowa State light.
Yeah,
and they clocked Iowa State's clock last year, so that might be an insult.
Correct. With a coach who has something to prove, like that coach, this is his Super Bowl. He comes here and beats Texas. Billy Napier is at a Power 5 program after the end of this year. Like this is huge for him. So I expect every trick play, every gadget play, every different look that they haven't shown on tape. Like I expect them to throw the house at these young quarterbacks who, whatever they're going to be preparing for, they're going to see something totally different in the game. Like, you just got to know that.
So when Sark says, I think about a week and a half to prepare for Louisiana is my wheel. That's what I feel comfortable with. I bet Louisiana has been practicing Texas since their first practice.
Since June.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Like, this is huge for them. So,
real quick, but I think you and I are both kind of in the same place, right? Like,
yeah,
kind of 9-3-ish. Like, nobody makes you go, oh, well, 10-2.
No, there's nothing that would make me jump on 10-2. Nothing.
And I just want, for the record, like, I don't know what my official prediction 1 loss is going to be either. As big of a fan as I am of Hudson Card, we may ultimately be arguing and debating and discussing this for months, and it might not matter, because the things that would make this team 9-3 and 10-2, it feels like, I don't know how much tell me that tells me if you were to tell me Texas goes 10-2, I start going, well, the defense is really good and the offensive line holds up and Bijan does go off and Jordan Whittington does turn into a guy that the quarterbacks can depend on and catch 80. You know what I mean? You say 10-2 to me, and it feels like a bunch of questions get answered. If you tell me 9-3, 8-4, it feels like, okay, well, the season's going to end, and there might still be a few. And that feels real.
You say, so basically, this is a upgraded version of Swoops versus Buechele, right? So, because at the end of the day,
more upgraded.
It's more upgraded, right? But at the end of the day, there was a 2,000-yard rusher in a 5-win team, right? At the end of the day. So now what you're saying is, hey, it's not going to be like that, but it's still, no matter what, it still is going to be somewhere in that 8-9 range.
unless I think things that are unrelated to the quarterback are at levels that we can't quite put our fingers on right now. And that's possible because I don't think 10-2, you and I think 8.5 is the correct over and under number, right? And we're talking 8 versus 9. It's only one, like 10 wins makes 9.5 the over under. That's not crazy. It's not. It means you go 10-2, it means you lose to Oklahoma and Iowa State and maybe win the rest of the games. And that's not impossible. You and I just don't know a Texas program recently that loses the 2 games it's supposed to lose and sweeps the board of everything else.
No, I haven't seen that.
That means they win in Fort Worth. They win in Waco and they win in Fayetteville. And you know what I mean? Like that's a Texas team handling its business.
Correct.
So, anyway, look, I'm curious. Put in the comments section answers to these very questions that Anwar have been going back and forth on. If Hudson Card's named the starter, what is your expectations one-loss record-wise? And is it any different with Casey Thompson? Put it in the comments box. We'll talk about it later on in the week. I'm curious to see what your comments are. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, come back for more tomorrow. We will have more throughout today. I've got a really good DeMarvion Overshown interview coming out later today where we ended up talking for almost 25 minutes because I think the conversation was really that good. I think he opened up and talked about a lot of really interesting things. It's all on the Orange Bloods Texas football channel for myself and the lovely Anwar Richardson in a suave pink fuchsia gray t-shirt that I kind of want for my own collection. Like
nice.
You and I show up one day to do the video. We both have that t-shirt on would be hysterical. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Be good to each other. Later.